Hey, okay, so let's talk about living at the extremes. This is a huge part of what leaves us susceptible to burnout. It, for many of us, feels like a simply a personality piece. It feels like we've always been this way. But what I notice is that most of us tend to live in exactly the way that we work. And one of the takeaways that I got from being trained years ago in EMDR was three of the biggest themes that tend to bring people into therapy or coaching. And those three themes are I'm not good enough, I'm not safe, and I'm not lovable. I think for myself and for an awful lot of healers that I've worked with, if we were honest with ourselves about what it is that we most want and what it is that most drives us, I think an awful lot of us are trying to prove our worth. I think an awful lot of us so desperately crave for people in authority to be proud of us, to recognize us, appreciate us, praise us. And what I've noticed is that we kill ourselves to earn those things, but then we're uncomfortable receiving them. And so we tend to push them away. And we create this pattern in which we're perpetually trying to get our needs met from the wrong people. I've experienced this with employers and supervisors in the past that I just wanted them to feel like they couldn't even run the place without me. And years later, I recognized that that was the type of approval and love that ideally I would have received from caregivers, parents, people that were supposed to meet those needs. So years later, here we are trying to prove something to ourselves and others, and we never quite pull it off. This was a service that a coworker provided me many years ago. He asked me two very difficult questions. The first one was, what is it that I was trying to prove? And the second question was, who was I trying to prove it to? And I hated the answers to both of those. What I was trying to prove was my worth. I was trying to prove that I matter, that I'm talented, and that I am lovable and acceptable. And it took me a very long time to see that. Who was I trying to prove it to? Well, anybody that would stand still long enough. But no matter how hard and how long I lived in such a way as to prove my worth, I never succeeded. The people that I most wanted to prove it to simply weren't emotionally available. They weren't paying attention. That wasn't something that they valued. They valued my productivity, my efforts, my sacrifices. They valued the revenue that I brought in. But the desire to be valued just as the person I am, not just for the things that I do, was never fulfilled. And what I've learned repeatedly is I can't prove things to myself when I am avoiding myself. I want to be on the same page with me, but I have a brain that goes 100 miles an hour all day, every day, with or without my permission. And I've learned that I create a lot of internal conflict when I seek to avoid external conflict. So, one of my big goals is to be on the same page with myself. And I have a simple practice that I recommend to folks to do that. My friends in recovery say that the longest distance in the world is from here to here. We struggle because what we know brings us distress or pain. Sometimes we intellectualize or complicate, justify, minimize, rationalize. We do all of these things to ourselves because we find the simple truth of things to be unacceptable or painful. What I've learned as a healer that has served me best is to follow my intuition, my gut feeling, if you will. And while I can go back and forth between these forever, if I follow my gut, if I listen to what my instincts and intuition dictate, I can get my head on the same page with those. The difficulty is always what it feels like. So when I get on the same page with me, when I'm rigorously honest with myself, when I'm willing to look at the truth, and again, I need a lot of support in doing this, I can process, I can acknowledge how things feel to me. I can look at what is it that I'm really trying to achieve, because it's always deeper than whatever I'm doing at face value. And I can allow myself to have a lot of support with that. These are some painful lessons. Um, the workplace is where we spend the most waking hours. Our coworkers, colleagues, and supervisors are the people that we tend to relate to the most outside of our immediate family. And many of us are simply replaying our childhood family of origin over and over again. Every organization I worked for claims that they were a family, and in a very real sense, they were right. Sooner or later, somebody's mom, somebody's dad, and the rest of us are kids who are competing for promotions, attention, approval, and that competition is based in an early lesson in our lives that there's never enough of anything. And so if you get yours, that means I can't get mine. And we compete. And we try to prove things that most often are self evident, like that we're lovable and acceptable. And our occupation becomes the basis for our identity. So later on in the series, we're going to talk more about developing a greater sense of identity, not just in terms of work life balance, but in terms of really knowing self.